Hello and welcome to Story Untold. I'm Martin Bauman, and if this is your first time listening, this podcast is about one thing: ordinary people with extraordinary lives. I've got a special guest this week. He's actually the guy that inspired this whole thing, the reason I'm doing this at all. Emanuel Fletcher is his name. I met him a good 7 years ago. At a time, he went by a different name, Air Black, and he was the guy at my high school who you compared yourself to if you thought you had any skill as an MC, which I did at the time. It was 4 years ago, though, that I got to hear a different side to his story, one that I never forgot, and it's what made me want to tell more stories like it. You see, Emanuel today is a motivational speaker, a husband, a father, but there was a time he thought he would never graduate high school, never live to see the age of 25. In fact, there was a day he got about as close to death as you can get, but it's what happened in that moment that changed his life forever. Here's his story. One of the things that what I think is really interesting about your story is that today you're talking to youth, you're in classrooms, you're speaking with people, sharing your story, and maybe 10 years ago or longer, you could have been one of those kids that really could have used probably hearing from somebody like yourself. Take me back, first of all, to what you were like in high school as a kid growing up, what that time period was like for you.
You know, that time period for me was a lot like what most people go through at that age, learning how to, find your place in life. Going into high school fresh, I remember it was a stage of my life when I was always trying to find people's acceptance. And for me, that meant like adding to my character, whatever people said I needed to add to my character. Grew up being rejected a lot. One of the big themes of my life was that I wasn't acting up to the standard of my race. I said, what does that mean? I mean, many times I'd be ridiculed for being quote unquote too white. To be black. That doesn't quite make sense to me, but that was something, I was really formed around societal expectations. I was always trying to live up to things. And essentially, when I got into high school, I'd already been on that path of, how can I live up to that standard? And for me, that meant taking on for myself this gangster mentality, this low-life motto, if you will. I don't care about anything. And that affected every area of my life. That was my school, my friends, my self-worth. So that's pretty much how I looked like, going into high school.
What is that like to be hearing something, somebody through music or through just societal expectations of somebody telling you what you should be like and not having that line up with your reality, feeling that sort of disconnect between this is who I am and I'm trying to just be me, but this is what people want me to be?
It's really, just thinking back, it's, you feel trapped, you feel burdened, you take on a lot of, I say it a lot, at a time when I should have been playing, Pokemon cards. I should have been more concerned about video games and just hanging out. Mm-hmm. There was a time I really felt like I was inadequate. I think that was the feeling of just feeling like a disgrace. You're having all these people tell you lies that you should do this, you should be this. And my biggest downfall, I would say, is, not getting a second opinion, mm-hmm. not getting that fresh perspective, that positive input. And that's what I like to think I'm giving these youth that I'm speaking to today. Someone else who can just give them a fresh perspective. Best way to believe in a lie is to not give someone else a chance to tell you the truth.
Now, that's interesting to me. You talk to kids today, kids growing up. And one of the things I was listening to the sampler that you have, and you mentioned how you'd become convinced that your life had no value at the time.
Yes.
I remember reading something. This is probably back when we spoke the first time, saying I accepted the fact that I'd probably never graduate high school, and that my life didn't amount to more than a few raps on YouTube and a couple grams of weed.
Yes.
Tell me about that. The first being at that low, and then coming to accept more for yourself.
Yeah. So, that was a time in my life I truly believed that there was no more to my life than what I had. A lot of that had to do with those influences, like we we're just talking about, in my life. But a lot of those influences for me, like it just, here's my belief. I think a lot of us are me specifically, I was always capable, I think, of what I'm doing now, mm-hmm. but my belief told me otherwise. But it was, shortly after having come close to death as a result of an unintended overdose, something sparked in me a desire to want to see my life differently. I began to imagine my life, how it would look like for people in my shoes, how I could help them. And just, there was something about focusing my life around other people, how I can help this person, how I can help that person. It really gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me a sense of, motivation, like a new energy. And it was steadily through that process, utilizing my gifts through my rap or my poetry or my speaking, my videos. Little by little, I would focus my life around helping people. And when I would see that effect, it gave me a new sense of worth. And it just built my self-esteem. It built my self-esteem. It built my self-esteem. And here's the thing. Why I talk so much about self-value is because I believe every area of our lives, every area is affected by this topic of self-value. Mm-hmm. See, no one gave me a new brain. No one gave me necessarily new skills per se. But once I started to see myself as, a contributor to this world, a benefit to people, that raised my self-esteem. When my self-esteem grew, that showed in my homework, that showed in my schooling, that showed in my relationships. And I really hope I answered your question, because I'm just babbling on.
All right, you mentioned there's a moment when it transforms. I want to get into that, but first I want to go to the points leading up to that. Mm-hmm. You haven't always you didn't always grow up in Kitchener. What's sort of your backstory for how you ended up in high school at Kitchener, or what took you up to that point?
So I was born in Jane Finch in Toronto. We lived there for a little bit. Moved out to Lakeshore in Toronto, but it was after my mom and my dad split up. My mom went to Winnipeg to live with her mom and finish university, and my dad had gone to Kitchener with my younger brother. Mm-hmm. And it was, around 8 years old, I had that awkward phone call saying, hey, do you want to live with me or do you want to live with your mom? If you live with your mom, you're flying 2,000 miles away. If you live with me, you're just driving an hour away. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? So, that was a whole little thing, but I decided to move with my little brother in Kitchener and with my dad, and that's where it all started.
I want to go back even further. What did you want to be before you started hearing that or started thinking that about yourself? I mean, everybody as a kid dreams of growing up to be something. What was it? What was the dream for you before you started telling yourself or believing that you couldn't be whatever that was?
That's kind of hard, because kids want to be like a different thing every year, right?
Everything a different day.
I did want to be, who didn't want to be famous, right? When I just started rapping at grade 2, I wanted to be a famous rapper. But more tangibly, I would say, is that I struggled with asthma all my life. Uh-huh. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to help people in that way. I remember talking to my mom about it. I was all serious. I was in grade 7. I wasn't, the best in the class or anything like that. But my mom was telling me that you would have to do academic, you'd have to do this, but talk to your teacher. I'm sure he would, give you some encouragement, and if that's something you're really serious about, I'm sure he can point you in the right direction. And I remember going to school in grade 7. I was all, I pulled my pants up, and I was all excited. But I stayed after school to talk to my teacher at the time. And I said, you know what, sir? I've been thinking about it, but I want to be a doctor. And is there, how can that look like for me? What do I need to do? Mm-hmm. And I remember it was like, I'm not even gonna say his name, but he said, you can't. Like, what? You can't be a doctor because you can't do academic. Mm-hmm. He told me I cannot. He didn't say you may be able to, or if you study harder, or if you engage in this or that, you might be. No, it was, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. The only reason your mom said that is because, academic in her day and age was a lot easier than now. And okay, sure, thanks. And I remember, and that's so funny because I didn't think about that for the longest time, but that I remember going into high school with that mentality as well. And speaking about school, because again, it impacts so many lives. Mm-hmm. It impacts so many. This is a huge part of the, how people see their worth and self-esteem, or what have you. I remember going into my first year of high school, which was a huge transition for me, as you know. I remember before they set you out of junior high and into the high school, they have all the teachers recommend you to whether you're academic, applied, or essential. And everyone was putting me essential. Every teacher, essential, 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 essential. And my one English teacher, I think her name was Mrs. Pahoon or something. I cannot remember. But she said applied. And I remember I saw the teachers literally say, "You think he can do applied?" She said, "Yeah, I think he can. I think he has something. He's gifted. I think he is gifted with his speech and stuff like that." And I remember she was being patronized, if that's the right word, or whatever, just for giving me an applied. I remember, and I took that with me. You know, I think a lot of the times too, adults don't really, and I'm a father now, so even I think we can sometimes underestimate how much kids really retain and pick up and notice. They're right in front of me. They were pretty much like, "Are you serious?" They probably think, "Oh, he's just a kid. He's not going to remember that." I remember that to this day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I still remember that. And as much as that one teacher who stood up for me should have gave me that, you know, that little hop in my step, you know, that little, you know, that confidence, it didn't. It just made me feel like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah.
I'm not going to succeed. I'm not going to succeed. And that's, again, when I went into high school, it was essential. Then even the special program, which was even, you know, below essential. And I was content because I thought that I would never graduate high school. That was my place, you know?
Yeah. It kind of goes back to thinking, you know, you could hear 10 positive things and one negative thing, and it's always the negative thing you're going to latch onto.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm bringing you back. This is like grade 2, you know, but the reason I bring up my beginnings is we all have one, you know, and I get to speak to people today because I had a shattered life. But your life never, you know, when you think of a windshield, it doesn't just like, it's not always like, you see like a huge cracked windshield, but often it's not the result of like this huge boulder coming through it. It's, you know, it's a little tick, you know, over winter and over summer, it just grows and grows and grows. And for me, like my tick was in grade 2. And I remember it was a daycare teacher of mine, staff member, whatever you would call it. And, you know, we were playing baseball in the schoolyard, and like I couldn't hit the ball. I couldn't make it to base. And I remember going to get a drink of water, right? But I got back, and what I had heard being announced to the class was that I was a mistake. So here I was, a little kid, hearing an adult, actually the exact words of that, God had made a mistake when creating me. And I'm 24 right now, but I still struggle to put into words the pain I felt in that moment. It's something I never forgot. Because hidden beneath the surface of most of my life's problems from that point on was that belief that I was inadequate, that I was a disgrace. And that really, I think, honestly, that forever changed, I think, the way I thought about myself in that point in my life. But, you know, even in junior high, but, you know, and no disrespect to teachers, because I didn't really give you guys good benefit of the doubt anyways. And, you know, I didn't give them reason to give me benefit of the doubt. I was very outspoken, obnoxious, very rude. But I found that sometimes teachers in junior high would kind of look at the exterior and not really ask the questions, you know, why is he like that? You know, why is he like that? I've had a teacher in grade 7 literally announce to the class. She said, "I'm going to tell your mom." I said, "Oh, she doesn't live with me." She said, "You know what? I don't blame her. I can see why." And, you know, so these things all add up. And again, for me, it just reinforced the idea, I'm nothing. It doesn't matter.
With all those experiences, what was your low? What was the moment, if there's a breaking point, or the times when you look back and feel like that was the worst of it?
You know what? Here's the thing. I've heard only so many of those things were, you know, aimed towards me. But it wasn't necessarily how many times a teacher has ridiculed me or a fellow student has ridiculed me. But it's what I did in response to that, which was for me to keep telling myself that over and over and over and over and over again. In many ways, I mean, I was my biggest enemy in a sense. Again, by refusing to reach out about my problems, refusing to get a second opinion, and, you know, by default, just pretty much just meditating in that and just telling myself that over and over again. But, you know, here's my biggest downfall, I would say. And I'm going to bring this up because I remember it like it was yesterday. I was leaving school one time in high school, my first year of high school. And I was essentially set up. I was attacked out in the schoolyard. And it was as if in one punch to my face, my whole shell came crumbling down. You got to understand, by this point, I had told myself that I'm going to recreate myself. I'm going to be the hardest. I'm going to prove to all those people who said growing up that I was not tough. And so in many ways, I created for myself this reputation and this character, which, caused me to be put on a radar. People are always out to challenge me, or rather the person I hid behind. And I found a lot of security in that. I was able to hide behind it. If people didn't respect me, I would try to make them respect me through fear or whatever else. I was really living in that type of lifestyle at this time. Fast forward, boom, punch to the face. And yeah, like I said, my shell came crumbling down. I remember standing in the middle of that schoolyard and I felt exposed. I felt naked, if you will. And I told myself in that moment that I would never be hurt again. Never be hurt again. And it's foolish because why it's foolish is because we're human. We're all capable of being hurt. Doesn't matter how tough you are, doesn't matter what city you're from. So the next best thing you can do is put on this act and pretend that you can never be hurt again, which just prevents you from dealing with the problem at the source. And that's what happened to me. So it was at that moment I began throwing away a lot of my moral convictions. It was at that time I said, literally my motto, I remember this was the first time I actually did drugs. It was that same day. I walked up to, I'm not going to say the school name or anything, but behind this pizza joint. And they're all smoking weed. And I just walked up to them. And before, I would always been, my dad's words would always ring in my head. Don't smoke weed. Don't do drugs. But it was something at this point, I forsaked all of that. It was at this moment I remember announcing to this group, this posse of mine. I said, you know what, guys? What? I said, my new motto, the new motto which I'm going to dedicate my whole life to is F everything. I remember announcing that. I announced it. And for me, everything changed from that moment when I verbally said my motto, the thing I'm going to live by, the thing I'm going to worship is this concept, F everything. And that's when my life really took a downfall for sure.
Yeah, what does that lens do to have a perspective like that? I mean, how does that impact your outlook on not only yourself but the people that surround you, your thoughts of future, your thoughts of potential? What did that do?
For me, that there is something deeper now. I was now consumed by someone who no longer cared about his future. Before I acted out in a sense of trying to defend it, almost to try to prove to people that I am worthy, I am tough. But now it was like, I don't care what you think. I don't care about my future. And teachers to this day recall how unapproachable I was. On the outside I was, I looked tough, I was aggressive, but I was a very anxious person. I never, it really, this lens, this motto really prevented me from wanting to deal with my anger, wanting to deal with these heavy anxiety problems I was dealing with, by the way.
How did that anxiety manifest itself? First of all, when did it sort of start? When can you trace it back to, and how did it portray itself in you?
I can trace it, my anxiety is back to, I would say even elementary.
Yeah.
I knew my place in life at that time was to just be a nobody, just to be the punching bag, just to be, at best, the class clown. Because, many times growing up, I was bullied. I was bullied a lot. My friends, though, ironically, were those who were tough. They were those who, were popular. But then again, they would make me feel as though I'm not cool, I'm not popular. And I just learned to kind of accept my place in that. But what happened is that, again, one of the consequences of not reaching out about your problems is that you become comfortable in your problems. You content almost. It's not that I wanted to be hurt, but part of me told myself that, it was better for me to be accepted as this than not to be accepted at all. And what I didn't know is that the effects it was having on me mentally around junior high, I became very afraid. It was literally times I thought everyone was out to get me. Everyone. There's times I'd be invited out with friends, literally, to hang out, but I would leave because my mind would be telling me that the only reason they brought me out was to inflict harm on me. It was really sick to be always in that mode. And it only grew in high school as well, when I started accepting for myself this gangster motto, this philosophy, or whatever you would call it. You know, I'd been in situations when I'd been beat, I'd been jumped, things like that, which just inflared it even more. But the tough thing, the gangster thing to do, is to not talk about these things. You keep all these things to yourself, you internalize it. And it's not many, I don't even say this much actually, but there was a time in high school I would not leave my house without a weapon. I mean, 14, 15, 16 years old, that's not normal. To not be able to leave your house without a rock or a switchblade or brass knuckles or something, that's a little messed up.
Yeah.
But that was the reality I lived in. From the moment I would see a man across the street, I would already begin fantasizing about what I'm going to do in response to his attack. Yeah. I would literally, like, you can wave your hand in front of my eyes. There was no response. I'm already thinking about what I'm going to do. That was my reality. I was almost obsessed with it. And I just lived in that, you know, just anxiety.
Everything was like a perceived attack.
I was always persecuted.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you were a teacher, you know, and I had some amazing teachers in my time who would call me in their office. They would sense that, you know, I was a troubled youth, but they would just be like, you know, how you doing? Is there any way I could help you? But how I interpreted, is there anything I could do to help you, is like, you know, I pity you, kid. I pity you, kid. You know, like I was just so programmed to think that everyone hated me or was out to get me. And people who would want to show me love, genuinely, I thought it was out of their own selfish intent or desire. So it really, it made it hard for me to even receive that help I think I needed.
And nobody wants pity. Nobody wants to be pitied.
No one. Yeah. Exactly.
You know, you've mentioned there's a moment when things change for you, and it happens in a really profound way. You hear a message, and it tells you, you know, you have a purpose. Take me back to that day, the events leading up to that day, and your experience.
All right. So I remember it was January 9th, 2009, and my friend and I were going to pick up some drugs. But I remember taking this pill, and it was ecstasy. And hours went by, you know. And by the way, I had been abusing ecstasy for months leading up to this. I had no reason to believe that this night would be any different, but it was. And it was a while, 2 to 3 hours after ingesting this pill, I remember noticing that my heart, no, not even my heart, my body temperature was starting to rise. Like I was getting warm. That's the one thing I can remember. It was a winter, cold day, but my body was getting so warm. But it wasn't until I made it halfway up my stairs that I noticed something else. Like I was dying. And, you know, someone asked me, well, how did you know? Well, my heartbeat gave it away. Mm-hmm. My heart was beating so fast and so loud, almost as if it was trying to tell me something, right? But this is what I heard. In a moment, in a matter of seconds, it wasn't going to matter how tough I was. It wasn't going to matter how cool I was. My clothes, my rep, all of it was about to become completely pointless. Mm-hmm. You know, but in that moment, the things that came to my mind rather were the things I could have done, you know, with my talents, with my time. And these are both things that I'd taken for granted. And contrary to what I'd always believed, a part of me in this moment no longer wanted to think that this was all I amounted to. Mm-hmm. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. More than the thought that, you know, I'm going to die, I was more terrified at the thought of what I could have done. Mm-hmm. These questions were running in my mind. I managed to make it up to the top of my stairs. And, you know, I fell to my knees, and I knew this was my final moments, if you will. And it was in that moment I prayed. You know, nothing fancy. I didn't say amen. I just said, God, please help me. I reached out in faith. And it's hard for me to explain what happened in this moment other than I knew I was physically there, but I can't even put it into words. So I felt as though I was being reassured that was not my place. That was not my end. That I was created for so much more. And the revelation I got in that moment is, you know, I'm looking at you right now, Martin, right? Like the reason you're sitting in the chair you are right now is not because necessarily you're born like that, right? I mean, the reason you're holding that in your hand the way you are, it's not necessarily born like that. Somewhere along in your life, you'd have to have been taught that. Mm-hmm. I was born holding a fork like this until mommy told me to hold it like this. So I'm going to provide a little bit more context. I had this encounter, which I believe to be with God. And he was showing me things about me in my future that I did not believe in at all. I saw myself speaking articulately, That's funny. I was well spoken.
Yeah.
I didn't have a bandana around my neck or anything like that. And I remember thinking, well, that's not me. That's not me. But the understanding I got in that moment was, from the moment you're born, it's not necessarily that you are who you're created to be. You're a product of your environment. And he kind of, God, I believe, told me in that moment that the only reason I was thinking that this is not what I could do and this is all I was limited to is not because of who I truly was, but because of what I kind of believed through the eyes and the mouths of other people. Mm-hmm. Essentially, he said, I know who I've created. You know what you have become. There's a difference. And it was in that moment I felt almost not compelled, but encouraged to use my gifts to honor God's work. And God's work is through the work of honoring people, helping people. I believe the only way you can really, serve God is by serving people. God doesn't need a new shirt. God doesn't need a pat on the back. He doesn't need someone to say, everything's going to be okay. I believe he's going to expect you to pass it on to someone else, and through that, he shall be served. And I just remember waking up, putting my hand over my heart, and my heartbeat was back to normal. Mm-hmm. I knew, many people say this was a trip or it was on your imaginations. Fair enough. That's your belief. This is my story, and no one can argue with my story. I'm familiar with drugs. I was familiar with drugs. And I truly believe this to have been the result of a divine intervention. Yeah. I believe I'm breathing. I'm speaking to this mic right now as a result of a divine intervention. And I remember feeling my heart that day just being like, this is probably going to sound so cliche, but I've been given a second chance. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to lose it. I'm not going to waste it. It was in that very moment I said, what can I do to help people like me? And that's where it all started.
In this moment, as this is happening to you, are you spatially aware of being in a room? Are you in a different place? What does it sort of look and feel like at the time?
How I explain it best is that, my eyes weren't closed. They were closed, but it wasn't like this, let me break it down, okay? So when you close your eyes right now, you see darkness. You see as though you can almost comprehend some space to it. You can tell that it's, maybe 4 inches from your forehead. There's a tangible space from your eyes to the back of your eyelids. I know it sounds weird, but there is. You can almost imagine it. Mm-hmm. In an instant, it seemed as though the space had just been ripped open, and it was just extended and extended and extended. It felt as though I was in the middle of a field in a pitch black football stadium. I knew where I physically was. I knew who I was. I knew I was in my kitchen floor. But my eyes weren't just closed. I was spiritually, I don't know how to explain it. But I'm glad that you brought this up, because I'm going to get into this, because if this can help, I'm going to get into this story. I was actually thinking about it too. I was able to even think where am I? What's going on? I was able to have that comprehension. I even tried to think for a moment, how long have I been here? Mm-hmm. But time didn't exist. I tried to think of time, but the only time that mattered or even existed was now o'clock. It didn't exist. And it was in that moment I began to hear singing. And the words that were being sung to me were that, God had sent you an angel straight from the heavens. God sent you an angel straight from the heavens. That's all I heard singing around me over and over again. It wasn't a man's voice. It wasn't a woman's voice. It seemed to have it was neither, but both at the same time. It was very, I would call it supernatural in essence. But yes, it was in that moment. That's when I felt God. I said I believed to have had an encounter with God. And that's when he came. And I didn't hear him, I didn't see him, but I didn't need to. He just made his presence known. It was almost as if he was always there, but he just enabled me to sense him. And I was scared. You know, I was scared. I remember even trying to like flee this presence. I couldn't. Like I was doing something like this, motioning, like I was just trying to flee it, but I couldn't. It was everywhere. You know, the most terrifying thing for me is because I wasn't even thinking about death and all that stuff, but it's why it was so scary is that I had this belief, I had this idea that, you know, you live, you die, you float upwards, and then you meet God.
Right.
But the scary thing for me is that I wasn't meeting him. I was remembering him. Mm-hmm. No one needed to tell me who he was. No one needed to tell me his authority. No one needed to explain to me what my life looked like in his eyes. I was able to know these things. And I was instinctively, I was able just to know it. I was able to know it. And thinking back, I was just able to know it. And I was scared. And it was around that time and again, this I want to say this as well. I'm paraphrasing because in this experience, like the words being spoken to me weren't like you and me talking. Not like it was something downloaded into you. It was almost mathematical. It was almost like you don't hear it, but you do. And for me to interpret it perfectly in English, I can't explain it, but if I were to put it in English words, it was as if God was saying, why are you here? Mm-hmm. This is not what I have for you. Don't be afraid. I love you. I received all that. I received all that of his heart. And I was at peace. As soon as he said that, I was at peace. It was around this time, like I had mentioned, he began showing me visuals, like visions, if you will. I don't know what you would call it. I was seeing myself. I knew it was me. Yeah. I dressed different. I was talking different, but I knew that was me in the future. And, you know, I was 16 at the time, but if I had to have guessed, it looked like me. I was maybe 25 years old, 26 years old. And that's, by the way, that's an age I never thought I'd reach. So on my 25th birthday, I'm going to be really happy. Yeah. You know, because that's every single time I think about 25. For some reason, that's the age I never thought I would hit. Never thought I would make it. Whether I was dead or in jail, something. I could never imagine myself that. So, you know what? Just not too much longer, Martin. So it'll be good. It'll be a good time.
That reminds me of a Kanye line. We wasn't supposed to make it past 25.
Really?
Joke's on you. We're still alive.
Oh, nice. I never heard of that. That's
yeah.
That's interesting.
Somewhere in there, I imagine you hear or you feel this message that you have worth. You matter. Your voice matters. Your opinion matters. Just you as a person matters. Yeah. What was that like?
Exhilarating. I remember I was in this void, but I gotta understand there is emotion. Emotion, by the way, was even more vivid. It was like emotion in its purest sense. It's like you were the embodiment of emotion. That's all there really. It was real. It was heightened. It was amazing. So I remember thinking to myself after receiving this, there's a lot more to me than I thought. Yeah. I remember the words that came out of my mouth in this moment, this point in my life, is that I was gonna rap his word. Whatever he wants people to know about their worth, I'm gonna do it through the form of rap. That's all I had at the moment. That's all I had to offer at that point in my life. But I said, I'm gonna rap your word. It's as if God said, go. I will bless you with that. And I remember like instantly, like it's like, I don't want to say bubbles, but just something, this emotion, such strong emotion, like electricity of joy and rejuvenation and just energy and like purpose. It filled me up to my head. Uh-huh. I remember thinking like, there is nothing that can stop me now. You're right. I had 3 credits to my name at that point in my life. That wasn't going to stop me.
High school credits.
Yes. Yeah. I know I had people still believing that I would not amount to much, but that would not stop me because for the first time in my life, I was given a new view of what I was worth, and that changed everything. And from the moment I opened my eyes, it was like, let's go. And it's actually quite funny too. I'm like, in this experience, I said, you know, can you bless me? Can you bless me with some talents? Like, again, I rapped, you know, I did my thing, but, you know, I still struggled. I struggled my whole school life with writing. You know, I showed some talent for sure. But, you know, there was certain parts of my work ethic. There is certain things that I still need to work through. And I felt as though God was saying, I'm gonna tangibly bless your talents even, you know? And what I was left with, if I can put it into words, was like, you know, stop doing what you're doing. You know, have faith and I will lead you to me. And it was from that moment that led to my decision to follow Christ. It was 6 months later. So that was a new life experience in itself, for sure.
Okay, so that brings up a question in itself, is having that experience, and I think that might be a natural question for somebody wanting to, if they hear somebody say, you know, I had this, you know, I heard God speak to me. What was your relationship like with God, or what was your experience like beforehand, if not to that level yet?
You know, I grew up in a Christian house, not a perfect one, but they had faith. Mm-hmm. You know, as a kid, they'd bring me out to church and stuff like that, and you know, I developed a belief in God at a very, very young age. I actually think a lot of us do, until we, you know, are taught otherwise, so to speak. I think, but for me, I did develop a belief in God, but the one thing I didn't believe was that He was a person. He wanted a relationship with you. He was unique, individually invested in people's lives. I knew there was God. I knew there was a creator, but I didn't really think that, you know, maybe He wanted a relationship with me. And to explain this, or to, you know, it would describe my relationship or outlook on God at that point. There is times when, like, I would be able to rob someone, and I'd be like, oh God, don't let me get in trouble. Or, you know, or God, I hope you make me hotter today. Like, these are weird things, but it showed that I had a belief in God as this, like, slot machine in the sky, so to speak. Like, I hope He gives me this, I hope He gives me that, but I didn't know His relationship, right? His heart, his person. I didn't know it.
You had the same experience I imagine a lot of people might have, in that you know, people have a cursory understanding of there's this collective understanding of what a God might be, or concept, and whether people believe it or not. But but I think even people who don't necessarily believe it all the time, there's still times when people, you know, wish for things and say, God, give me this or that.
Exactly.
So that was sort of your experience at the time. Mm-hmm. Another curiosity I have is, so this wasn't your first time doing ecstasy. What were your previous trips like, if they were nothing like the one that changed it all for you?
Normal. I mean, we know, well, some of us know the side effects related to ecstasy. Oh boy. You know, there'd be I'd be up for days. Wouldn't have to blink. Things like that. It's horrible, but it's more an ecstatic. It's an emotional high, not like a trip, if you will, that you're hallucinating. Not like that. Not in the way that, no, not at all. I remember the first time I did it, Martin, I had done 4, 5, 6 pills in one night. I walked away fine. Second time I'd done maybe 2, 3 pills, walked away fine. I'd have my trip, I would speak, I was whatever, blah, blah, blah. But you got to understand, the night I did this and I had this experience, I was not high. Mm-hmm. I did not get high. I had no effects of ecstasy. I didn't perceive any high response to ecstasy. Right. None of it at all. And here's the thing too, I only had 1 pill. Yeah. With chemical drugs, there can be, that's why, and I want to take this time to say this as well, is that, you know, you want to be careful when engaging in drugs, because many people will say, you know, oh, this is just a little bit or whatever, but you never know, especially when it comes to chemical drugs. What I learned is that you can overdose on 1 pill of ecstasy, because there can be a chemical imbalance within that 1 pill. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily a matter of if you had 10 or 1, you can overdose off 1 pill. So I wasn't high, but what happened is that it responded to it in a negative way. So I don't know what I had. It was something bad though, and had no business doing in my body. That's for sure.
what was it for you with the ecstasy before? Was it an anxiety thing, a way of getting over anxiety, or what was it?
It was like I turned to, I turned to marijuana, and how I turned to alcohol or toxic relationships. It was a form of escape.
Yeah.
It's how, many people even turn to pornography. It's an escape. It's in response to, and for me, that was it. It was, the thing I actually remember is that it really helped me to silence those anxieties in a sense, but it allowed me to be free. I found myself being able to be, I think, closer to who maybe I was before all of the bad influences and stuff like that. I was able to say sorry. I was able to engage in conversations that were meaningful and sensitive. I was able to show my sensitive side without a sense of conviction and guilt. I just felt free. I remember getting off of it too. I remember when I would just be so depressed. You know what I'm saying? So I think I turned to it like that. But I'm blessed. And when I speak to people today too, that's why, despite my faith, despite anything, despite how my present life may show signs of success and things like that in that nature, I never forget where I came from. One way, actually, I remember there was one time during an ecstasy trip, I stared at the sun, because I couldn't blink. And I remember marveling over the fact that my eyes aren't burning. I'm just looking at the sun. I remember waking up the next morning and I was virtually blind. I could not see. I could see, but it was just this big rainbow blur. I wouldn't be able to tell your face right now. Whatever I focused on was like this big circle, followed my point of focus. I couldn't even see my friend's face. I was so scared. I remember going to my neighbor's house, who was a role model to me at that time. And she was going through her own things. She was going through AA, and she was learning about God herself at this time and things like that. And I was talking to her, and she said, what, if you ever need anything, you could talk to God. And this was before my experience, so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I know that. She said, seriously, here's a God box, take it. So I guess one of the things she was taught is to write her prayers. Just write them down, put it in her God box, and God will, in that act of faith, he'll help you. I remember that same day I was staring at the sun and wrecking my eyes. Someone had given me a pack of gum, because with ecstasy, you tend to chew a lot at your teeth. And I remember someone had given me a box of gum and said, hey, this will help you. I said, thanks. So the next day when I was virtually blind, I was scared. I thought that I lost my vision for life. And it was like this, maybe for like 3 days straight before I think I really, really was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I took this God box that was given to me, and I'm like, I'm just going to ask God to help me. And instead of writing a prayer, the only faith I had was to take that gum package that someone had given me for that trip or that experience, and I just put it in the God box, and I closed it. I said, God, please help me, and I locked it, and I put it away. And within the next couple of days, I saw this big scar tissue, I believe on my eyeballs, scar tissue, was like reduced. And I can see today. But no matter where I look, if I'm reading a book or looking at you, I always still have this rainbow circle floating around there.
Wow.
Just to remind me where I came from. My sole purpose today is to, in light of that, is to give youth the same chance at life that I was given. You know what I'm saying? And help them see a little bit more clear.
We've talked a lot about the events leading up to such a profound change. We haven't talked really about the afterwards. And you've mentioned this idea of another thing that you talk about when you talk to these kids that were in a similar place that you once were. There's lies that you tell yourself. One, that you aren't worthy already. Now, to change that around, to realize you have worth. What is it like now for you to be able to speak to these kids who I'm sure remind you of what you were once like yourself?
It's amazing. I actually had a dream once, a real dream. And I was walking up to a bus stop, and I noticed this young guy standing there, right? But it wasn't until I got closer that I was able to see who he was. and it was me. I was older at the time, but if I could guess, it was the me from like junior high. I could tell by the shirt I was wearing, the black and green marijuana bandana out of my right pocket, the do-rag I was wearing. I'm like, it was such a vivid dream. It was weird. But I said, this is me. And I remember going to speak to him. At first, I was just trying to convince him that I was in fact him from the future. And he just gave me this look like, whatever. But I remember I desperately wanted to tell him something. And just as I was about to tell him something, I think I woke up. And when I speak to kids today, to youth today, it's as if I was speaking to my younger self. It's an amazing feeling. Not many people have that opportunity, sometimes. But I really see it as though I'm sitting in that crowd and I'm speaking to me.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned before too, there was a time when you felt like you really didn't have a future. You weren't going to amount to anything. Now you're a father of two.
Yes.
What's that like, fatherhood?
It's educational. It's good. No, I'm learning more, I'm learning every day. It's great because when I look into my daughter's eyes and when I look into my wife's eyes, when I look at just my present life, it's a constant reminder that I was wrong. I told myself for so long that I would never amount to anything, yet alone marriage, fatherhood, speaking to people today. Every day I wake up my life, I have the privilege of being able to be reminded that, I was wrong. And it's amazing. It's amazing for sure.
It's the best thing to be wrong about ever.
Exactly. And it also shows me this. It's that, success doesn't need to look one way. You know what I'm saying? There's many people who aren't, the people I'm speaking to, they'll believe, they need to be that rapper. They need to be that NBA player. They need to be this or that in order to make it. But I feel like my life just is kind of like, contrary to that. It's in opposition to that belief, which would say, success means you need to be famous or you need everyone to be bowing down to your feet. Success for me is the fact that, I'm making goals and I'm reaching towards them. Success to me is the fact that I'm learning how to be the best me that I can be. My best may not look like your best. My best may not look like that guy's best. But it's that constant pursuit of just bettering yourself and just, rising above for the bettering of yourself and the people around you. It's exhilarating. It's amazing. And you know what? I would say it doesn't matter how many times people clapped for my raps or things like that. I've never had this type of feeling, just to be living in this reality of that. Yeah.
There was a time you mentioned you told your friends, my new motto is F everything.
F everything. Yeah.
What is it now that gets you up in the morning that drives you each day?
Oh, okay. One of my new mottos is pleasure through purpose. Pleasure through purpose. My getting up every single day is to honor God through how I honor people. And to put it in a sentence, it's to give youth the same chance at life that I was given. I think that would sum it up, to give people the same chance at life that I was given. I mean, we can talk about the weather for so long. We can talk about the NBA for so long. We can think about money and bank accounts and 5-year plans and mortgages, but there's something. Is that it can't be all that there is. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, no. If that's all there is, then I'd rather go now. It's no. But I think the only thing you can leave behind is the effect you've had on people that you're leaving behind. You know what I'm saying? And that's what keeps me going. I'm currently working as a UCP at Chartwell, and I see I work with the elderly, but on their walls I see pictures of them when they're my age. I look around the corner, I see them on their bed and they're old, and I think, whoa, it's very sobering. Mm-hmm. Now when I'm on that bed, what am I going to remember? What? Mm-hmm. If it's not the effect I've had on people I'm leaving behind, then what? if it's not how I loved my family, if it's not how I reached out to that one person and just asked if they're okay, if it was not, trying everything in my strength to give people a better chance of life, then what? Is what's in your bank account? I mean, the type of shirt you wore on Wednesdays, like what? So yeah.
I think it would be one thing for somebody to have that belief in themselves, that self-worth right from birth. I mean, you got it later on. It's one thing if somebody were born with that, but you still have that memory of an entire life almost before that, of feeling a different way. You've kind of described yourself and your past as like imagine a shattered windshield, the cracks that form along the way. How do you look at that windshield now and you see the cracks and how it's all taken shape now?
That was deep. That was deep. I could say that I got a new windshield. God's given me a new life. I could say that the cracks are still there, but I've learned to see through them in a different way. I can say we're all cracked. But I'm still imperfect. I'm still cracked. I'm not shattered, but I'm still have my flaws. But that's a beautiful thing. The world doesn't need superhero. It needs people who are human. It needs people who are honest with their humanity. It needs people who are willing to say, look, I'm not perfect, but I am learning to be the best me that I can be.
And you're still worthy.
And I'm still worthy. Exactly. Still worthy.
Thanks a lot. It's been great.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure being here again and just talking about all about me.
That's it for the show. Thanks for listening, and I hope you liked it. I still get amazed hearing his story, and regardless of what you think might have happened that night, whether you think it was a bad trip, whether you're right there with him, it's inspiring, beyond inspiring, to see how his life has taken shape since. Emanuel, by the way, went on to graduate at a university level. I would love to see some of the people who told him otherwise today. You can learn more about his public speaking at inspiremyyouth.com. If you like the show, do me a favor, head on over to iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher, whatever you use, and hit subscribe, leave a rating while you're there too. It goes a long way. Theme music is by Dr. Turtle off the album You I'll Ah. I'm Martin Bauman, and this was A Story Untold. See you next time.